Hi, everybody. It's August 17th, 2023, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer Meeting. We had a little off week last week, but we're back to talk about Backdrop, and in particular, probably Backdrop 126, which is coming up around the corner. We've got Feature Freeze here, and shockingly, looking at the calendar, it's just in 2 weeks is Feature Freeze for 126. That's on September 1st, which is on a Friday. And so it's probably the case that that will be our feature freeze date. We're not really in a big hurry to wrap anything up. I think that, well, we can talk about it during this meeting. But first, I'll do a couple of introductions. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet. I'm core committer, co-founder of the Backdrop project. And I'm joined here this week by Tim Erickson and Olaf Grabinski. Tim, do you want to say where you're from and anything else?
Sure. I'm Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota this week. That's really all. But quick plug for Backdrop Live coming up in a month.
And you can find more information about Backdrop Live at events.backdropcms.org.
Yes.
Okay. And Olaf?
Yeah, I'm Olaf from Hamburg in Germany. Backdrop site architect, building a lot of backdrop sites. I'm also a member of the Backdrop project management committee and work with the translation server and some other things. Nice to be here.
Great to have you, Olaf. Thanks for joining so late. It's much later over there. All right, so we only have a couple of topics for today. I've been a little out of things as of late, so I'm not super on top of things, but we're going to talk a little bit about CKEditor 5 because that's a topic that is of concern to a lot of people, I think. I did want to say that already, so CKEditor 4 is already officially end of life, that it's no longer officially supported for most situations. The Drupal community has reached an agreement with CK Source to get security fixes through November of this year, 2023, under a special agreement that like Drupal has kind of got a special relationship with CKEditor. And speaking of special relationships, we also have a somewhat special relationship with CKEditor, and so they've graciously extended the same agreement towards us. So at least if a security issue is or security release is created for CKEditor, both Drupal and Backdrop are permitted to use that that's kind of proprietary patches and releases under the GPL license. Exactly how that works, like for other GPL projects, I don't really know. But I think at this that we're all just trying to make things work and be accommodating with each other. And I'm not quite sure if CKEditor wants to, CK Source wants to somehow fight the fight of who gets to use their releases or not, then that's their prerogative. But anyway, we're not going to upset them in any way. Basically continuing to do what Drupal does. But again, that's only until November. So it's not like a really long extension onto the life of CKEditor 4. So CKEditor 5 is definitely a big priority for the project. What's the status of our CKEditor 5 project? It's in contrib as of just a couple minutes ago. There's a Backdrop contrib, CKEditor 5 module, similar to Drupal CKEditor. The original namespace will now mean CKEditor 4, and CKEditor 5 module is for the new version. It's coming along pretty well. The current state of things is that has support for the backdrop link functionality, including uploading files. It does have image uploading capability, and those images get tracked by file usage. Copy and paste images, the toolbar configuration, and then the automatic configuration of text formats based on the toolbar. That functionality is all kind of working. There's some issues. We're using the issue tracker in the Contrib project to generally track the state of things. The biggest thing that seems to be a gap, in my opinion, is that the image browser, like the media library, doesn't actually open yet. You can upload a file from disk, or you can insert a URL to an image, but you can't actually use the image browser yet, and that requires some additional work there. So, but the general layout of things is kind of in a usable state. And actually, if you wanted to use this module on your website, you could go ahead and do that, but you would have to have live with a couple of compromises for the time being. Let's see. Yeah, Olaf mentioned before the meeting that it would be nice to get some more community support behind this, and I totally agree. It's a good reason for why this module should be in Contrib instead of in my private repository. Gregory was already helping, Klonos was helping with this module, but anyone else who would like to participate in this kind of a little bit looser structure than we normally do for core development, please reach out, file an issue, and say that you would like to also help maintain the module, and I'd be happy to add you, because there's lots of other things that need to be done, like test coverage, for example, that just has to be written before we move this into core. But we don't need to be very we're not at the polishing phase yet. We're still in the experiment and try to get things working phase. And so it's definitely a much looser workflow than our normal core development process, where everything has to be perfect before it gets merged. Yeah, Olaf.
One question. What do you think about editing existing content with that module? Because I heard that in Drupal that raised some problems. What's the state about that? And isn't that the most critical thing if it's an issue?
Yeah, so I think looks like you commented actually on this issue, that issue 36 in the CKEditor 5Q is about the list of blocking issues for Drupal. But that actually doesn't include the really big item, which we have a separate issue for, issue 28, which is generic HTML support. And so when CKEditor 5 first came out, this plugin for CKEditor didn't yet exist. And so what would happen if you edited any existing content that had a tag that CKEditor was unfamiliar with, it would strip it out, which would include things like div and span. Because if you didn't specifically tell CKEditor, here's what to do with a div, then it's I'm just going to strip out everything I'm unfamiliar with, which does result in very nice markup, because then you end up with just paragraphs and images. But heaven forbid you put an image inside of, I don't know, a bulleted list or something like that. That structure isn't allowed inside of CKEditor's data model, and so it would just strip it out. The generic HTML support plugin is something that you can turn on now, that when CKEditor runs across markup that it doesn't know how to handle, you can configure that plugin to make that content read only, but so that it won't be editable in the editor, but it also won't delete it, which is, for the sake of backwards compatibility, probably a fine compromise. if you want to edit that piece of content, then you could switch into source mode, modify the markup directly, and then switch back. And if you've put it into a place like an image, if you move it to the root, and SeqEditor knows what to do with it, then it switches it back to being editable again. So that's our solution, I think, for backwards compatibility. I don't think it's going to be perfect, but we're going to have to do some more work before we even see exactly what kind of impact that's going to have on people's content. So that's the general approach.
So the approach is to integrate that plugin.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a question here of like how loose our HTML policy should be, like by default, and if there's a need for granularity there. Like SeqEditor works perfectly fine without this plugin support whatsoever. And even on most content, unless if you're just writing normal blog posts and, there's paragraph tags and stuff like that, it's going to be fine for most content. But, it's the content that, at one point somebody might have gotten ambitious with their blog post or something like that and written a bunch of manual HTML or tried to do something really fancy with like a lot of floated images or something like that ended up in an accidental, or maybe they copy and pasted something from Word, that had like an unusual format, and SeqEditor could treat that unkindly. And so, but if you created new content today and you pasted from Word, having generic HTML support off would be better. It would end up with cleaner output. And so I kind of wonder if this like HTML support should be, generic HTML support should be an option that you can turn on and off in the SeqEditor configuration. And maybe even more than that, like, exactly how much do you want to strip out? But I don't know, maybe now we're getting into contrib land level of granularity for that sort of thing. Because like the situation that I could see getting really, unfortunately, difficult is for sites that have turned on SeqEditor on full HTML support, where there's all tags allowed. Because in that situation, SeqEditor doesn't know how to deal with a lot of potential things, like if you, I don't know, put an SVG image in there or something like that, like there's just a lot of potential tags, and you'd basically have to turn, I'm not quite sure how this works, but you'd have to turn off like all of SeqEditor's like filtering, and I'm not quite sure how what kind of impact that would have on your experience of using SeqEditor. But anyway, the less filtering you do, generally the worse the experience becomes, because then when you copy and paste stuff, it allows the format to be, well, now I'm thinking about it, I'm not even sure you could copy and paste stuff into SeqEditor 5 with generic HTML support, because literally it's not going to write anything that it doesn't know how to read. They're going to need to do some experimenting here, because I think that it could make things really poor. Without generic HTML support, when you copy and paste from Word, it just like strips out everything that it doesn't know how to deal with and gives it its very nice formatted markup that it does know how to deal with. And it like keeps the text, but like strips out most everything else. So I just don't know what would happen if it actually did keep all those spans and divs that Word is so fond of creating. But I don't know.
I'd be very interested in testing this, because I guess that also on sites where the editors are not so ambitious, there could be some stuff which could be get lost at the current status. So without the generic HTML support. And so I'd like to see it on I could test it on a copy of one of my sites just to see an average website, because most of the sites are not only blog posts or something. Most have something, with HTML stuff in it, and I think the risk that people lose content is it's very it's bad for the people, but also for the project. If 10 people lose content because they don't know how to handle that, that would be not nice for us, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm up to do a lot of work with testing. So
yeah, if it would be really nice if we could get sophisticated here. One thing I never liked about Drupal's implementation when you switch between text editors is that it gives you an alert when you switch between text editors saying, you might lose some content if you do that. And then you just say, okay. And most of the time you don't, but sometimes you do. But you don't actually know if you've lost content or not by switching a text editor. It just gives you a little warning saying, if you change this, something bad might happen. Which I feel like is a bad user experience because it could be discouraging people from doing something that they should do. And like a really sophisticated solution that would be much better would be if you could take a snapshot of the markup before the editor was attached, and then do another one after, like you get the editor's value after it's been applied, and check if there's a difference, and then notify the user, hey, the content in this field has been modified because this editor was attached. Please review it before saving, and do it before before they hit the save button, and actually only do it if the difference has actually been detected. That maybe would be a nice little way of accommodating users, but it also might freak them out in a way. But I don't know, it's like it should freak them out if their markup has been modified without doing anything. Just the act of applying the editor changed the markup is not what people expect. So yeah, maybe I'll file an issue on that, because I don't think that has been proposed before, but provide, let's see, get editor 5 modifies content just by being attached, just by being used. Okay. Okay. Yeah, do you guys have any other things you'd want to hear or talk about with Cicadator 5? Okay. This issue just came up today. 1 second, I'll share my screen. Martin, Yorkshire Pudding, put this into the weekly agenda meeting. Thanks for finding that, Olaf. And okay, sorry. The options for sharing a screen changed in Zoom recently. Here we go. Okay, so remove interest cohort header. This is something that the Drupal is doing, and Drupal project is doing, and something that we should probably follow suit on. My understanding of this is I'm not super familiar with what happened here, but my understanding is that Google introduced some concept that is called Flock. And the concept kind of was is that Google by default will be allowed to track you around the internet unless it encounters websites that specify a certain header that like block that tracking from happening on that particular website. And the backlash was so severe to this proposal, and every major CMS, including WordPress, implemented the blocking header in their out of box configuration, effectively making it so that almost all websites wouldn't have tracking enabled by default. And Google was so demoralized by the backlash that they withdrew the entire proposal and it never went into effect. And so it was important that we participated along with everybody else, right? To express displeasure and the concept of generally allowing tracking in the first place. Like that Google's approach on this was like track by default unless people say no, but they weren't expecting the entire internet to say no, like from a server side perspective, because unlike individual users that are ignorant of what corporations are doing, when the websites themselves are responsible for saying whether or not tracking is allowed, web people were much more savvy, I think, than and responded in force to this proposal. So yeah, Yorkshire Pudding is just asking like, can we remove it? And I think just generally the answer is yes there, because I don't think Flock will ever be implemented, and this header probably won't ever have any effect. So I love to comment here as much, saying as much. Anyway,
You said there was no meeting last week, and I noticed that there was Indigo Zella had raised an issue last week.
Oh, okay. Do you know what number it is?
6197. And I don't know if this is something we've dealt with. PHP 8.2 support for taxonomy vocabularies.
Mm-hmm. How long has this been going on? Okay, so this is started just last week, but it's got a lot of comments on it already. This is going to take me a little while to read through, I think. Generally, I can summarize what the general state of things is that in PHP 8.2, if you're going to put properties onto objects that aren't declared, you need to specifically say as much when you define the class. So prior to 8.2, you could just use objects like arrays, and you could just add properties to them willy-nilly, even if that property hadn't specifically been defined in the class definition. And now in 8.2, it throws a warning when you do that. And all of the entity types, users, taxonomy terms, nodes, all have that property enabled by default, because there's all kinds of random stuff that just gets added to those objects by various modules. That's unlikely to change anytime in the near future. But it looks like this is specifically about vocabularies, and vocabularies in Backdrop aren't entities. So they don't follow the same rules as nodes, users, and terms, because vocabulary is like a node type, a content type. It's a type of content, not content itself. And so it looks like, I think generally this is just like a question of like, should we do this? Like, should we make it so that they allow dynamic properties by default? the thing is that I don't think a contrib module has the opportunity to change this. Like, if a contrib module wants to put on an additional property onto a vocabulary or onto a node type, for that matter, that needs to be the PHP setting to allow dynamic properties needs to be at the declaration of the class, which means it requires a modification to core. I wonder what we're doing for content types. Because if we're doing it for content types, that probably means we should do it for vocabularies too, because vocabularies are essentially just the taxonomy version of a content type. But yeah, I'm still gonna have to read through this. It looks like this got there was a whole thing happening here. So yeah, I'm sorry, Indigo Zella. I don't think I can do feedback right here on the spot. If I would have seen this issue beforehand, I would have been prepared. So we'll come back to this. I'll read over it and then provide feedback. Let's see, Olaf, you also had 2 issues you wanted to talk about today. First one is internal and external links. Do you want to just summarize where this is at, if you're familiar?
More or less. So yeah, it's about the link fields, and the link fields. I think the most important thing here is they have autocomplete field, and that's there are some issues with it if you paste or type in external URL, because then the autocomplete tries to look up what you are typing in, and you get a lot of not relevant stuff there. And that's so, and there are often use cases where you just want that people paste external links there, and that's doesn't work very well. And BW Panda opened that issue a while ago, and there was a lot of progress. And I think there's also a PR which is working more or less, I think quite good. But they are also missing some things, for example, the usual tests. And yeah, when I built a site recently and I needed this again, I stumbled upon it, and I thought it's a pity that it went so far, the issue. We made so much progress and also a long discussion, and now it's in a state where where it's stalled in a way. And yeah, this is just a suggestion to revive the issue and to bring it into Backdrop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of agreement. I posted that I'm in favor of it too already. Yeah, so it looks like, yeah, it's a really simple set of changes. But yeah, there's no test coverage yet. What's the current state of this? Okay, needs code review, works for me, needs automated tests. That sounds like that's a pretty good summary, and help wanted. Sounds like it's a pretty good summary of where this is. Okay. One thing that would help a lot would be if this had an advocate. If it had an advocate, then we can put it into the 116 milestone, and that'll just make it so that we kind of have a deadline for this, which I think most people would prefer, that this get into it. So if it's really close, it would be really nice to get this in the next couple of weeks, and then it would be in the 126 release, and then that would be nice to have. So now is the time for features that if you want to get them as soon as possible, you don't have very long to wait at this point. So yeah, Olaf, if you're not an advocate for anything right now, if you might just
Yeah.
consider saying, I'd like to advocate for this, and then just put it into the 126 milestone. That's really all that you need to do in
Mhm.
order to get it in there.
Okay, I just write. I'm
And maybe
advocating
just
for
do a
this.
quick summary, a report on where it's at and what needs to happen, and hopefully that'll help get somebody who can write those tests.
Sorry.
And then just write a summary, update the issue with a note saying, it looks like we just need some tests here. Can anyone help
Yeah,
us with
okay,
that?
okay. Okay, I'll do that.
I mean, it's that sounds right? Nate, that you said the code looks pretty straightforward, so that it isn't that a lot of work needs to happen in the code. The big blocker is just the automated tests. Does that sound right?
That is my understanding.
Okay. Well, Olaf could skim through there and make sure we're not missing anything, but if that's true, then
It looks like there's some questions about help text and validation, which these are kind of normal. It's us bike shedding over descriptions is not uncommon.
Mm.
well, having a summary of what the outstanding issues are would help.
Okay, I can do that.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. There's one more issue. It's on the agenda for today, and that's issue 6142. Questions about the all-day functionality for the HTML5 widget. And Olaf, you're the petitioner for this, but this hasn't really gotten any traction yet. There's no responses or anything like that. You just want to give us a summary, and then we'll just kind of use this to surface the request.
Yes. So it's about the all-day functionality for a date field, and for normal or for a long time, this worked well with the all-day module. So let's start again. If you want to add a date to Backdrop using a field, you can do it out of the box, but you have to use the date all day module.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for a while now not possible with all widgets of the date functionality in Backdrop. We have now for a while the HTML5 widget, which is very nice, I think. And we use it at various places, also in the node form. And I think that's the way to go for Backdrop, to use this widget even more in the future. But this doesn't work with the date all day module. And so we are now in a situation where you have to use the old widgets if you want to use the all-day functionality. And at the same time, the date all-day module is not maintained very well, so I don't think that we get help there. And because of this, I was thinking, why don't we support it directly in Backdrop? Because it's just such a normal thing to add a date and say that's only, that doesn't need a time. And I think it should work quite good, the HTML5 widget, but I don't know code-wise, but yeah, so that's the idea. And so far I didn't get any feedback on it. So for a start, I'm interested in feedback about that idea.
Yeah, I haven't looked at this in any time recently. I kind of, I'm a little two-sided about this, that it's like, if the biggest problem is that the contrib module isn't maintained, the most straightforward approach would be to start maintaining the contrib module and then just make it work, you know.
Yes, but people are also saying, "Oh, this module, it would be so hard to because how the module works. If I understood it correctly, it would be very hard to add this to the module, and I think so. Looking in the future, I think people also started to mention that maybe one time the other date pickers get deprecated. And so if the HTML5 widget is a future, so we could consider at this point to just add that functionality to this widget, because that's the way to go in the future, not to use that maintained module.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And the date HTML5 widgets also, like, it's also not very hard conceptually to collect just a date without a time. Like, that's not very hard. I think the trick of the date all day module is that it provides a checkbox that allows you normally to enter a time, and if you check the checkbox, then it removes the time and only shows you the date. And that's the trick of what that module is actually doing. You can already add a date field that is just a date and no time. And you can already add a date field that does have a time, but you can't have something that does both, which is what the all day module really kind of does.
Yeah, I think also, I'm not sure now if I recall correctly, but I think in the HTML5 widget, you can just enter only the date and you can save it, but then it saves it with the time.
Yeah.
So I think, 12 o'clock or something, but then with time zone handling, you get some problems. So I think conceptually it should be easy to just not save the time in this situation.
Yeah,
Not sure about the technical background, but
I'm thinking about this. One thing that has always bothered me about all day functionality is that I believe the way it works is that it basically doesn't really save an extra field like to the database saying this is an all day date. Instead, what it does is it modifies the date value to be something like it has a special time, that's like this time means all day. And it's probably something just like if it's set exactly at midnight sort of situation, or at 23:59:59, then that means all day, And so it's actually saving a time still, my understanding of this, but it saves a special one that then indicates to it that it's all day, and then it modifies the input and the output when it sees that special date. That's pretty janky.
Yes.
It would be, Core could solve this in a much more graceful way if it had a column in the database for all day, and then it just knew that stuff was all day instead of needing to match the special magical timestamp. So I don't know. The fact that you could make this so much better in Core than it is in Contrib does make that, like, that's a pretty good argument for it, I think. But I still get a little bit worried about an additional core burden when Contrib could handle the problem. But I could see this, if it's something that only Core can handle currently, then that could be a good argument. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. But we're out of time, and I've got another meeting to
Yeah.
go and attend to. So thank you, Olaf. Thank you, Tim, for both being here today and facilitating discussion. It was great.
Thanks, everybody. See you
So,
soon.
yep, we'll see you guys next week.